Welcome to the second segment of evaluating resources to use for your project. We had already previously discussed a few things that you should look for within a website before you even start taking notes and deciding that you're going to use that source in your project. So we're going to pick up in part 2 with a few more things that you need to look at again before you've decided whether or not to use those web sources. So the first thing we're going to talk about in part 2 is objectivity of a resource. What you need to know is that all sources are providing some sort of an angle or a bias upon which they're written. They're trying to push an agenda, so to speak, to get you to believe that what they're trying to tell you is the best way of telling it to you. This doesn't mean that it's a bad source. You just have to evaluate the source to make sure that the information is actually factual and not misconstrued or just constructed to make and get their point across. So look for actual facts, look to make sure that their source is telling the truth. The next thing you're looking for is to see, again, that that's a more of a neutral tone or language that's factually based. But the more neutral you can find, the better, because then you know they're not trying to push an angle on you in their resource. The goal should always be clearly stated. The purpose of the website, their goal should be clearly stated. If it's not clearly stated, then they may be trying to push an agenda or an angle on you that is going to give you information to lead you to believe something different than what you need to believe, and that is the core information for your research project. There's different forms of bias and angles that people try to push, and I've outlined a few that I want to talk about. The first is just flat out lies. If you know flat out that it's a lie or that the information is not truthful, don't use that website. If somebody's misusing or twisting of information or taking, a lot of times what people will do is they'll take out of the original context and only let you see what they want you to see. They're just trying to highlight something to mislead you, and you don't want to use sources that do that. If you see that the source has very emotional language and tone, if you can really tell they're trying to push their angle on you, you may not want to use that web source. If it's really vague or very broad generalizations are being made, and they don't get in depth in the descriptions and the things that they're trying to tell you with their information, then you might not want to use that site because it's not going to give you the information you need to do an in-depth research project. If it's very dumbed down, if they've oversimplified it, if they've made it, went above and beyond the point of just making it easy to read, but it's just too dumbed down. This kind of goes again with that vague or broad generalization. If the arguments are very one-sided, if they're not presenting two sides to an argument, if you've chosen a controversial topic to do your research on, they should always present both sides to the coin. Otherwise, they're just trying to push their bias on you. Are there advertisements on the website? If you notice that there are several advertisements and they're trying to advertise to you a certain angle, then you might not want to use those particular websites because they're trying to sell you something. Some examples that you might run into of websites that are sure to include bias include websites that are blogs, editorials or personal columns, commercial websites. They're trying to sell you something. And then some people just make their own website. They aren't credible, they aren't scholarly, they just want to make up their own website to share their personal beliefs or knowledge with you. And those really aren't good sources to use. The next thing we're going to talk about is coverage and reasonableness. Many websites will bring back just a touch of the basic information, just kind of that tip of the iceberg information on what you originally searched for. When you're doing these in-depth research-based projects, you are trying to get deeper into and find more knowledge. And I want you looking for more than just this tip of the iceberg information. You should be looking to reference websites that really give you a lot of detailed information. You know, everyone reads the textbook, but you are doing you're taking your project to the next level, and you're going to provide us with information that no one else has done, or few have done in-depth research on before. I keep using the word tip of the iceberg information that most students are going to learn, and the bottom kind of got cut off on this point. But if most students are being exposed to this material, again, if it's in the textbook and everyone uses the textbook, you can start with that information, but you need to go next level and you need to go deeper. So look for sources that go that next level. You should, number one, make sure that it's reasonable and that the information provided is even relevant to your topic. Sometimes your keyword search will bring back a website that looks like it might be resourceful, and it's completely off topic and doesn't make any sense. So obviously you want to stay away from that particular resource. Consider the level at which the information reads. Okay. If it's too difficult to understand, then the author may be using or misusing information in their website. And more importantly, if it's too complex or too confusing for you to make sense of it, if you can't comprehend what it says, don't use it in your project. Because if I ask you a question on a point that you made in your project and you can't answer me because the information that you were using to make that point was over your head, that doesn't do you any good. You didn't learn anything from that. It might have provided a good supporting detail in your project, but if you can't understand it, do not use it. Okay, so make sure you use these websites that are developed around a level in which you can read and understand. Look to see if it's covering all aspects of the topic. Again, even the opposing viewpoint, especially if it's a controversial topic that you're discussing. A really well-covered and reasonable website is more credible and relevant than any that does not provide enough, if any, information. Okay, what I'm saying is, the more information, the better the information, the better of a chance for you to want to use this website to provide research in your paper. The next thing we're going to talk about, and the last thing for this segment, video 2 and segment 3, is the sources. Authors should be using reliable sources when they are developing their websites. You should look to see that the authors or the resources used and the website you're referencing are legitimate and back up what they're saying. That the websites that they're saying they're using, check them out and see if they look good. If there are no references made on a website, the information could be opinionated, it could be personal knowledge, it could be personal beliefs, and you might not want to use it. If they're referencing something and they have resources, it makes it much more legitimate source. Good sources always will provide links to a list of sources where they got their original information. That's why we say if you use Wikipedia, don't get your info from Wikipedia. Go to the bottom of Wikipedia where they have listed their sources and start there for your information. Along with just checking for supporting sources, you should highly consider using the links that they have used to get deeper information yourself. As I previously mentioned, cross-referencing. Cross-referencing means that you go from link the links on the page that you are on doing your research to the other pages where they provided their research, and seeing where that takes you, to see if it takes you in depth or if it takes you to a dead end. That's really important. Again, I just mentioned this about Wikipedia. That's fine if you want to originate your search from there. However, we don't want you using that. It's kind of like an encyclopedia, an old-fashioned hardcover encyclopedia. It's a really good starting point, but go to the bottom of that page and use their additional links and resources, and that's going to get you better information. Those are going to get you primary and secondary sources that are going to be better for supporting your arguments or supporting your research in your project. Okay, we don't want you using Wikipedia as a source. Please stay away from it. Get better information. Use these steps that we talked about in evaluating resources to make good decisions and select good resources when you're doing your research project, so that you're not putting down sites that are soft or superficial, or not providing a good basis for what we would consider an in-depth research project.